What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to the Cutlass Board Games channel, and this time we are talking about Commander. I have been playing Commander a lot recently. It's kind of casually, some fun with some friends, and we've even been doing live streams on the channel every now and again on a Wednesday night where some of my friends come over and we play games. We spend a lot of time talking about what we're going to build to play on the live stream, what kind of bracket are we going to play, and what kind of theme are those decks going to be. And constantly we're bumping up against this problem where the bracket system feels wrong. The bracket system, which they've implemented into Commander as a way to judge the power level of things, where 5 is bonkers, I'm trying to kill you as often as possible, and 1, where this is my first game ever of Magic the Gathering, is trying to create a language that players can use to communicate how strong that their deck is. And it feels a little ill-considered. And I'm going to be showing off 10 cards that I think need to become game changers, because they have a list of cards that are called game changers that you can only use if you were in bracket 3 or above. If you're in bracket 3, you can use a low number of them. You're picking which ones you think are going to be best serving your strategy. But if you're a 4 or a 5, you can use as many as you want. Now, this list of 10 cards are cards that you can play in a 1 power level deck because they are not game changers. And soon you'll see why that is a little crazy and why I think they should belong on the game changers list. Let's get started with Oath of Druids. This is a fantastic card. If you're a vintage player, this is a vintage deck. I know of a couple of cards in this list because I have played Eternal Fulfillment. So I used to play Legacy quite a lot. And then when I went through and I looked at the Game Changers list, I'm like, wow, there's a lot of cards banned in Legacy that just aren't on this list. And now, let's go through how Oath of Druids works. Oath of Druids says, at the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player chooses target player who controls more creatures than they do and is their opponent. So on my turn, if somebody else has more creatures than me, I can activate Oath of Druids, basically. That player reveals cards from the top of their library until they reveal a creature card. If you do reveal a creature card, you put that onto the battlefield, and all other cards revealed this way into the graveyard. It means if you're playing something like a Golgari deck, you can kind of run this with no downside, and you will just get a free creature every time your opponent has more creatures than you. Now, the way that this was played in Eternal formats is that you would play land in particular. I believe it's Forbidden Orchard, which would create a 1/1 spirit for an opponent every time you tapped it for mana. That was the downside. And so you would give somebody a 1/1 creature, and then Oath of Druids would activate for you. You would get a creature into play for free, and it could be gigantic. It could be a big Eldrazi or whatever. Your opponent has a 1/1 spirit. Now, because they have the same number of creatures as you in their upkeep, Oath of Druids does not trigger for them. Now, in a 4-player pod, you pick someone that gets a spirit, or someone plays a creature which activates Oath of Druids, you'll get a creature. You and that player will have 1 creature. There are 2 other players that will have an Oath of Druids trigger, and they will get a creature. Then everyone will have 1 creature. Any person plays a creature after the first one, everyone else gets an Oath of Druids trigger. And so basically you go, here's Oath of Druids, no one ever play a creature, and I won't get a gigantic dude for free into play. You might get some junk because you're playing mana dorks and stuff, but it'll benefit me the greatest. And it's kind of a really horrible negotiating tool. It's like Standstill. Standstill says if any player plays a spell, sacrifice Standstill, each other player draws 3 cards. And so no one just wants to play spells. That's kind of the same problem that Oath of Druids has. And mind you, Standstill not on this list, and also Standstill not a game changer. But let's move on. With our main argument so far is that it is banned in Legacy, and we're going to see a couple more of those cards coming up, except this is instead Chains of Mephistopheles. This is a card that you probably have seen me play on stream, and I like this card very, very much. I, in this list, am saying that it should be a game changer. It should be only in 3s and above, because sometimes, especially in 1s and 2s, and a lot of precons have this problem where they struggle to keep cards in hand. They struggle to play a lot of things that give them gas and help keep them in the game. And what Chains of Mephistopheles does is it punishes players for drawing cards. really aggressively. It basically says your hand size will never get larger. Chains of Mephistopheles is argued to be one of the most complex cards in the game. It's really not. If you would draw an additional card, you don't. You then discard a card, and if you did discard a card, draw a card. If you did not discard a card, mill a card, then draw a card. Or just mill a card instead, sorry. And that's it. Basically, your hand size never gets bigger. But I play this because I love playing decks that draw a bunch of stuff, but also just really want things in the graveyard. So it doesn't matter to me. I'm happy to discard all the cards, but it stops my opponent who played Rhystic Study on turn 2 from drawing 15 cards a turn because no one will ever pay the 1. This is a fantastic card to be playing a commander to deal with Rhystic Study and Mystic Remoras, but I still believe it's at the power level where it should be a game changer. Next is Ragavan. Fuck this card in particular. Ragavan is one of those things where people put it on the table and everyone goes, man, I have to pay attention to this thing going on. It's stressful. It's a lot of value from like literally turn 1 in the game potentially. And if you want to be, more careful with it, you can be dashing in it instead to protect the Ragavan. And it's banned in Historic, which is like Arena's Legacy equivalent, and Legacy. And it's pretty cooked, honestly. Even if you never hit a card that you can cast off the top, getting a treasure every single turn is better than most other things that do the same thing. Like, not many other things can consistently create a treasure in that same way. And a lot of the time, there's going to be at least one player that doesn't have blockers for Ragavan to just kind of get through for free. And then you have this upside of perhaps big card advantage that you then have to deal with. So I think, like I said, these are not cards that should be banned from Commander. These are cards that should be put on the game changer list so that they only show up in higher bracket games, and also they show up in less frequent amounts. Like, if you're not, I'm playing red, I'm playing Ragavan, you should be considering, whether or not it belongs in the list more carefully, because it is very, very strong and it does garner a lot of card advantage. Let's move on to the next one. This is Vivi. Everyone hates Vivi right now. Everyone just really, really hates Vivi. It's a very, very strong card. And paired with cards like Curiosity, it goes really insane, basically. Everyone should be really familiar with how potentially horrible Vivi can be, especially with the Agatha's Cauldron decks we've been seeing recently. But even if it was just the second part, where it was like I deal 1 damage to everyone and I get bigger, that's already very strong. Also, making a whole bunch of mana as well is very, very strong. I'm interested to see if we do get a modern deck pop up that is going to be abusing the kind of things that the banned standard deck did, because that's kind of, how modern used to function. But basically, Vivi is another one of those cards. When it hits the table, everyone's like, I have to deal with this problem. It's taking up a lot of focus. It's pulling a lot of aggro, so to say, as to what's going on, because people kind of inherently understand what the ceiling is for what Vivi can do in a pod. And because it's hitting each opponent, something that we've noticed with things like Blood Artist versus some of the more recent iterations of it, where it's like Blood Artist is target opponent. I think like Zulaport Cutthroat, for example, is like each opponent. If it was just target opponent, then Vivi would be like really, really different. It would be designed to make much more sense for something like standard. And also, it can be prevented with like hexproof and stuff like that, because it's each opponent, it hits everyone, and it's hard to stop. And it's pretty easy card to help you storm off if you're playing a blue-red kind of combo deck. Next is Necrodominance. This one is really interesting to me because it's very, very similar to Necropotence, and Necropotence is a game changer. The main difference is that Necropotence gets around things like Notion Thief, Chains of Mephistopheles, because it exiles it, puts it in your hand. But I would argue that, and I have seen decks that do this, Necrodominance plus stuff like Sheoldred that says whenever you draw cards gain life, gets pretty crazy pretty quickly. And it is still like just a gigantic amount of card advantage. So imagine you're playing a precon and someone goes, cool, I'm just going to Dark Ritual Necrodominance, I'm going to draw 7 cards, I'm going to exile some of them sick, I'm ready to go. Here's Crick on turn 2 or something, and then you're just really far behind. It feels like it should be a game changer. If you have a look at some of the arguments for some of the cards that are on the game changers list, I'm talking Restick Study, it's really about gathering so much extra resources at such a smaller cost. Restick Study draws you a lot of cards kind of for free, and black doesn't care about losing life that much. It's like pretty easy for you just to draw a bunch of cards and it not be a big deal. So I think Necrodominance with Necropotence, which are basically doing the same thing, do deserve a spot on the ban list. And we will pause for a moment here to point out an honorable mention, which did not make this list, which is Mystic Remora. Mystic Remora also draws you a million cards and probably should be on the Game Changers list. I haven't really heard a good argument for why it shouldn't be. Maybe people, just aren't paying the upkeep cost as much, but you're guaranteed to draw a card. People really cannot pay the cost to stop you from drawing a card, and getting 5 or 6 cards is kind of worth it. So, I don't know. Maybe, look, if you think Mystic Remora also should be on this list, say something in the comments, because maybe I should have put it on here. But let's talk about the next one. This is Bazaar of Baghdad. This is the vintage card. This is the Vintage Dredge All-Star Bazaar of Baghdad. Banned in Legacy, because it's busted. It's just so powerful. And if you're playing a commander that just wants cards in bin, this is great. This does everything you want. It's like a great Gitrog monster kind of card where, or Huthhull, kind of the same. You just want cards in bin. It's really strong. It's really strong. But also kind of busted in decks that can just play Yawgmoth, Cradle of Growth, and Tomb of Yawgmoth, which will make it either a forest or a swamp, respectively. And then it can tap for mana. The downside is that it does not tap for mana and it's a land. But you can solve that problem. And you can just run the Bazaar, which is kind of insane. Basically, I know the text is stupid long on the original one, but basically it says, draw 2 cards, discard 3 cards. That's it. That's what it does. But you can replace those draws with Dredge and then make sure that those cards that you've just dredged back in your hand stay in the graveyard. And a whole bunch of other stuff to help fill up your graveyard really fast. This card is crazy, and it should be a game changer. If the Cradles are on there, this should be a game changer. Let's move on to the next one. This is Vexing Bauble. Now, this one is a bit of a tougher sell, I think. Basically, whenever a player casts a spell, if no mana was spent to cast it, counter that spell. This just is a good hose for certain things. Like, if you're playing Vexing Bauble to stop Force of Will, sick. I get it. That's a card that should be stopped. Vexing Bauble stopping stuff like Boldest's Citadel, also probably fine. I'm kind of okay with that. But Vexing Bauble stopping stuff like Cascade. Cascade is a very fun mechanic and just kind of catches astray from Vexing Bauble. Things that are like, is it plotted that you then cast it for free on a... Yeah, it is plotted, because Foretell's only have to pay the Foretell cost. It also stops Plot. Plot's not great as a mechanic. It's not that powerful. There's no cards on any Eternal format ban list with Plot written on them. And so I think it just hoses too many things that are fun in Commander, unfortunately. And so I think it makes a little bit more sense for it to be on the game change list. It's also an egg, so it does also draw a card, and also it goes kind of crazy with the Bomberman combo. I've seen a few CEDH recorded games where basically they go Bomberman combo, get infinite white mana, then Vexing Bauble, draw my entire deck, and then find the thing that kills all my opponents. And Vexing Bauble has no downside until you're comboing off. It just sits there, and it hoses a lot of interaction that opponents can bring against you. And that's pretty strong. And look, it being on the Game Changers list changes nothing for CEDH, the place where I believe it belongs. changes nothing in 4s, but it means that you're not playing it in 1s and 2s where those fun mechanics like Cascade, like Plot are more likely to show up, and I think that is a fair enough argument for this to show up on the game changes list. Next up, we have Sensei's Divining Top. Fuck this card. Fuck this card so much. I, like I said, have played a lot of Legacy. And in the era where Sensei's Top was legal, and Miracles was one of the biggest decks. And basically, Miracles says you can cast something for cheaper off the top of your library if you drew it as the first card you drew for the turn. Terminus being one of the best board wipes printed ever, being able to cast for just 1 white is kind of insane. And then also Entreat the Angels, which can just make a ton of 4/4s that fly in your opponent's turn with the Sensei's Divining Top. It's kind of crazy. And they've also printed some new Miracle cards in the Warhammer 40k set. And if your argument was that I specifically want to play Miracles in Commander, and that's why I'm using the Sensei's Divining Top, I get it. That's a flavorful choice. It's on theme. Fits with what you're doing. There's not enough Miracles to build the whole deck, so God forbid you do actually need some Scroll Rack, some Sensei's Divining Top effects to help get them to the top of your library. I get that. But banned in Legacy, banned in Modern, and kind of the reason why is it adds a lot of time to the game. And so my main complaint is that Commander, which can already kind of spin its wheels a lot. If you've caught some of the live streams we've done, we played the Doctor Who precons, and it went for like 2 hours because we just spent so much time wheel spinning and not accomplishing anything, and it was really hard to close out the game. Sensei's Divining Top just adds a lot of wheel spinning unnecessarily to decks that don't need it. Like, there's no archetype in Commander. There's no, like, just so hardcore control deck that works consistently enough for it to require a Sensei's Divining Top to do anything. Like, I've played Countertop with Counterbalancing. You just look at the top card of your deck, go, do I want to counter this thing on? I've had Countertop played against me, and it was fine. It wasn't that crazy. The chance of you actually being able to consistently manipulate the top card of your deck to be the converted mana cost that you need is really hard because your resources aren't that consistent. I've also played Falco Spira, where if you have Devoted Druid, which you can put a counter on it to untap it and then it makes green mana, you can use Falco Spira to remove a counter from the Devoted Druid to cast the top card of your deck. And that means that Sensei's Divining Top can draw your entire deck. That's fine. Look, if you're playing a combo where you want to draw your entire deck with Sensei's Divining Top, and there's a few different ways to do that, 3s, 4s, 5s. 1s and 2s don't need help running longer than they do. They don't need that kind of strategy in the game. We need to be so closely scrutinizing your resources with the top. So look at what's there. It's not necessary. Let's move on to the next one. This is our second last one. This is Yawgmoth's Will. This is a card that, look, if I got all my wishes and I got to pick 9, I'm happy for this one to stay. But I think using the same argument as some of these other cards, banned in Legacy, restricted in Vintage, this is the only card from this list that is restricted in Vintage, proves that it's really, really strong. In CEDH, you get to see some crazy combos with stuff like Lion's Eye Diamond and Yawgmoth's Will, where Lion's Eye Diamond played after you've Yawg's Willed just basically gets you an extra 3 black mana. Because if you're not casting the cards in your hand anyway, you don't care if they get exiled. And you can just play everything out of your bin. It gives you so much insane card advantage. And to look at a standard equivalent, it's not Enter the Infinite, but there's a green-black card. It costs like 10, and it says exchange the cards in your hand with the cards in your graveyard. And that's kind of what Yawgmoth's Will is doing. And so, look, it's just insane card advantage. I had it played against me last time I went out to play Commander with the gang, and they had Crypt of Agadeem activate, Yawgmoth's Will activate, they cast Consuming Aberration, and then they cast 11 spells afterwards. And if you know what Consuming Aberration does whenever a spell is cast by the owner, each other player mills until they find a land. So we all lost like 30, 40 cards out of our decks on this one turn because Yawg's Mill gave them the ability to play so many cards out of the bin. And with a graveyard-focused strategy, and a big Crypt of Agadim, it does go kind of crazy. And it's also not a game closer. Like, if it was like, this guarantees you win the game, like Crater Hoof, that kind of thing, it's like, this wins, then it's a lot easier to analyze something by going, okay, when does this win the game? What does this kind of do? Yawgmoth build basically gives you access to so many resources. Like, you could say that if I've milled 20 cards, and then in that time, 7 spells were cast, and I got to draw Rhystic Study of all of them, Yawgmoth will see 17 cards that you can play with. It just seems so much card advantage. And being able to play something like Dark Ritual, Yawg's Will, Dark Ritual immediately afterwards, can, you know, really escalate into some kind of crazy stuff. Also, just being able to play a land from the bin for turn, also pretty good. It's also pretty strong. It's one of the few things that allow you to kind of play through the entire, you know, rotisserie of options that you have. But like I said, I wouldn't be upset if this one was not made a game changer. I just think it's really, really strong. And then let's talk about our last card. This is another card that I really hate. Fuck Wash Away. This card sucks. Now, my reason for why it should be a game changer is that Drannith Magistrate is on the game changers list, and Drannith Magistrate says players can't cast spells from anywhere other than their hand. Basically, and I assume the reason why it's put on that list is because it stops you from playing your commander. So does this card. This card says for 1 blue, stop you from playing your commander, which is cooked. That's so frustrating. And, you know, I'm obviously talking about personal trauma here when it comes to the Wash Away, because I play Brawl quite a lot. I really like to just casually have it running while I'm, you know, watching a TV show or whatever. And they go, sick, here's my commander. When it enters the battlefield, I make a land. That's all it does. And my opponent goes, Wash Away. Fuck you. And it's like, I'll just concede and go next. I'd rather not play with a cunt, actually. Like, it's one purpose. The one thing that it does good is counter your commander. And when so many games, and especially for people that are playing in brackets 1 and 2, right? They're like, I found this really cool card. I want to play it and build around it as a strategy. Here's my commander. I love him. He needs to be washed away. I don't want to play anymore. Why have you done this? And so I think it needs to be a game changer. You can fire with me about it in the comments, but I'll know I'm right. I will. This card sucks, man. Compared to all the other stuff on this list that is just super powerful and should be restricted accordingly, this is just too much of an asshole card, and that's why it should be on the Game Changers list. And I'm based, and I will not be hearing any criticism for it. But that is 10 cards that I think should become Game Changers. My overall criticism is that the Game Changers list is very small. There is a lot of niche case cards that are kind of insane, and we kind of see this sometimes with the precons, where the half-hull precon deck is not at a precon power level. You could argue that it's greater than a 3 because it has mass land denial inside. Now, that's a precon. That's a choice that Wizards of the Coast made. And I think that they did a good job. They go, here's a good framework to give you an idea of what your power level is. And I know that there is some vagueness in that, because the actual 5 brackets is a bit more detailed, but I feel like most people's grasp of it is 1s are precons, 2s are no game changes, 3s are 3 game changes, 4s are do whatever the hell you want, and 5 is CDH, which is just vintage. What, like, legacy, modern, standard, like, it just feels like it needs more. I think it needs a second look at it. I think there's so many more cards that need to be put on the Game Changers list. I also think Smothering Tide needs to be fucking banned. Get rid of that card. And Rhystic Study just needs to be banned. Get rid of that card too. I think they're toxic. I think they warp the game in a negative way, and they should go. But my request for this video is not that. My request for this is to consider extra cards being added to the Game Changers list. And look, if there's any cards that you think also need to be on the Game Changers list, please let me know in the comments, because there's surely something that I've forgotten about that is incredibly bonkers and very annoying to play against. So, you know, mention that as well. I also would have put a lot of mass land denial stuff like Blood Moon on here, but it's kind of categorically covered without being specifically mentioned, which I also think is a mistake, and I think a lot of those cards need to be specifically named. But that's it for this video. I do like coming and, you know, talking about some game design stuff, and Magic the Gathering has been a game I've started playing a bit more again recently, and if you're interested in that kind of comment, I will put a playlist up on the screen so you can go and check out some of the other stuff that I've been working on, some of the deck lists I've been cooking with, some of the stuff I've been playing around with, and even check out some of the live streams of us playing recently. So go and check all that out, and I'll see you next time when I have some angry gripe about the game we all play.